Hello there, my name's Paul James and welcome to Gamer School. In this series I'll be diving into the archives of our great industry, and on a regular basis we'll deliver you a sequence of lessons focusing on one of the industry's greatest studios or franchises, notable for all they've inspired and created, for delivering incredible memories and having been leaders in shaping the industry into what it currently is. In Lesson 1, I'm here to talk to you about Seiken Densetsu, or as many of you may know it to be, the Mana franchise. As I will with every time we meet, let's kick things off with our history lesson. The Mana series first debuted as a side story to the flagship, but then still quite small Square franchise Final Fantasy, but quickly grew into something that had legs of its own. As stated, the Mana franchise was initially billed as a Final Fantasy companion, with the first title called Final Fantasy Adventure, but by the time the second title in the franchise emerged, Secret of Mana, all ties to the Final Fantasy franchise were severed, from naming right down to thematic references, common characters, and creatures. Unlike the core Final Fantasy games, Adventure was not a turn-based RPG, in favour of a more action-centred approach. While still retaining many aspects of the core Final Fantasy formula, Adventure was more reminiscent of a traditional Legend of Zelda entry. A variety of weapons, experience, and GP can accumulate as a product of battling enemies in the field, while, as in further entries, the appropriate use of a particular weapon can destroy environmental obstacles. The foundations for the franchise had been set. Beginning on the Game Boy in 1991, Final Fantasy Adventure was just the springboard for what is to come in the franchise's future. Final Fantasy Adventure returned to the collective consciousness when it was remade and re-released in February of 2016 for the PlayStation Vita, iOS, and Android platforms. Secret of Mana is the game that kicked off the Mana franchise and the one that put the franchise right on the map. Seiken Densetsu 2, or Secret of Mana, released on the Super Nintendo in August of 1993 in Japan, before gradually making its way to the United States and then PAL regions over the following 18 months. Secret of Mana is regularly referred to by many die-hard Super Nintendo enthusiasts as one of the best and most influential games of that console generation. Secret of Mana was applauded for its vibrant use of colour, enormous plot, and innovative ring command system, as well as its real-time battle system. Critics also recognised the game's impressive original soundtrack and customisable AI for your computer-controlled allies. A re-release of Secret of Mana arrived 15 years later on the Nintendo Wii Virtual Console before coming to iOS in 2010 and Android in 2014. Most recently, a remake has been released and came to PS4, PlayStation Vita, and Steam on February 15th, 2018. Seiken Densetsu 3. This 1995 release is a sore spot for many fans of the franchise. In some circles, it's referred to as the pick of the games in the Mana franchise, but many Westerners will never know that because the game never left Japanese shores. The cited reason for the non-release of the third Mana game was simply down to the fact that the game could not fit on the cartridges used for Western versions of the Super Nintendo. What players missed in Seiken Densetsu 3 was the first game in the franchise to introduce elements of non-linearity and the ability to choose 3 of 6 potential heroes to bring with you on your adventure, which resulted in distinct encounters and endings dependent on your chosen trio. All this on top of the 3 main plot lines, and Seiken Densetsu 3 gave players an enormous amount of content to consume. An English fan translation was released in 2000, which has proliferated over the internet and allowed many Westerners the opportunity to play a game that would otherwise have been lost to the history books. For Western fans, the wait between Secret of Mana and the next fix would be an excruciating 6 years, and even longer if you weren't an occupant of Japan or the United States. Legend of Mana was the next game in the franchise, but if you weren't living in either of the aforementioned countries, then it was going to require some shady dealings with pirates in order to get yourself a copy. Legend of Mana released on the PS1 in 1999 and changed many things that fans of the franchise had come to associate with the IP. The game featured temporary sidekick characters that the player can recruit, breed, or build, as well as a weapon and armor creation and tempering system. This, along with a divisive change to the way that locations were represented on the game's map, caused Legend of Mana to not resonate like either of the previous 2 games in the franchise. PAL region players had been waiting a long time before they got their first post-Secret of Mana fix, but in 2003-04, Square-Enix finally granted fans their wish, and it took the form of Sword of Mana, a remake of the original Final Fantasy adventure. While in many respects, Sword of Mana kept true to the core tenets of the original game, Square-Enix took time to revitalise them to bring them to a new audience. While the story remained the same, a bit more meat was added to the bone, with it also being adjusted to allow players to play through the eyes of either the game's hero or heroine. The decision to have your ally character controlled solely by the computer was a contentious decision that to this day still doesn't sit well with many veteran Mana players. What Sword of Mana did mark though was the first handheld release in the Mana franchise since the original in 1991, with the Game Boy Advance playing host. More change to the formula was on the horizon for the Mana franchise with the releases of both Children of Mana, a 2006-07 release, and Heroes of Mana in 2007, both arriving on the Nintendo DS platform. Both did very drastic things to shake up the formula, with Children of Mana being focused on randomly generated dungeons, while Heroes of Mana was a real-time strategy game in the vein of Age of Empires or Warcraft of the time. Neither game received much critical or commercial success, with many fans and critics suggesting that the duo of games deviated too much from the established formula to a point where it lessened the quality of the experience. As if 2 games between 2006 and 7 weren't enough, but there were another 2 that also released in the same period. Firstly, there was Friends of Mana, a mobile phone entry to the franchise that had a fairly successful life in Japan until service was shut down in February of 2011. Dawn of Mana also hit the Japanese and American shelves in 2006-7, but was the recipient of the worst reviews of any game in the Mana series to that time. Dawn of Mana was, as always, praised for its visuals and music, but in this case was heavily criticised for its poor combat and annoying levelling system. Dawn of Mana would be the very last time to this very date that a Mana game released on a home console, and it would be a very quiet 6 years before the franchise re-emerged into the spotlight. Circle of Mana, which released for both iOS and Android, was a card battle game that tasked players with the responsibility to defend the Mana tree using cards that featured characters from Secret of Mana, Seiken Densetsu 3, and Dawn of Mana. By completing all the game's levels, players would collect the Sword of Mana and return balance to the world.
Aw, come on. Get back here, will you?
Rise of Mana is the latest new entry to the franchise that saw release in Japan for iOS, Android, and PlayStation Vita. It's the closest in a long time that the franchise has come to its roots, but still played host to a lot of modern day customs, especially customs of the mobile platform. These additions included 8-player co-op and a free-to-play model with microtransactions. The reception to the game by both Japanese and Western fans alike was much more positive than in any Mana game of the previous decade. Move ahead to 2017 and another Mana game was on the way. This one was a collection of many games of the franchise's storied history. Coming to the Nintendo Switch, prospective owners had the opportunity to play Final Fantasy Adventure, Secret of Mana, and Seiken Densetsu 3 all on one platform, all portably, all together. As of the time of publishing this video, there's been no further information revealed about this package, specifically whether or not it will be coming to international audiences. If it does though, it will be the first time that anyone outside of Japan can legally buy Seiken Densetsu 3. The collection arrived in Japan on June the 1st, 2017. The Mana franchise is one that's adored by hardcore audiences both in Japan and abroad. While the critical reception for each subsequent game has waned in the many years since Seiken Densetsu 3 launched on the Super Nintendo, there is always steady demand for more from the IP. From Rabite to Flammy, Mana Spirits to the Ringerman system, there are many countless threads that connect each game in the franchise and ensure that it is still one of the most in-demand IP in an already bulging portfolio of IP at Square-Enix. Many are hoping that it won't be long before we see this once great franchise reclaim its throne. So that concludes this session of this lesson of Gamer School. Now before we throw to some music from the franchise, a little bit of housekeeping. If you're looking for any more content from myself, then please be sure to like, share and subscribe to this channel, and please visit player2.net.au for a whole lot of my written content as well. If you want to catch me for any follow-up chats, then I can be found on Twitter at PaulJamesP2, where I'll love to hear any feedback you've got to provide to improve future lessons. As for now though, I hope you've learned something interesting that you can bring with you to your next online conversation, but until next time, that's all the time we've got for now. Class dismissed.